Welcome to the 32nd lecture of this open course on diffusion in multi-component solids. In this lecture, I have discussed various diffusion mechanisms that have been proposed in intermetallics. I have illustrated these diffusion mechanisms with respect to B2 structures. So, last lecture we went over the point defects in ordered structures including ionic compounds and intermetallics. Intermetallics is fast emerging as a new class of material, especially for high temperature applications, because they sustain very high temperatures. And so, the study of diffusion in intermetallics has become very important. So, this class we will go over some of the diffusion mechanisms that have been proposed in intermetallics. The first mechanism is called nearest neighbor jump, or in short NNJ. So, as the name suggests, it is simply a jump onto a nearest neighbor site, and this is assisted by a vacancy. So, the jump of a vacancy onto a nearest neighbor site. So, if we consider a B2 structure, corner atoms by red color, these are type B atoms, and this body center atom as A, which is denoted by blue color. If there is a vacancy on a B sublattice, let us denote the vacancy by a square. Since all the nearest neighbor in B2 structure are different type, a different type of atom would jump into this vacancy by NNJ mechanism. So, type A atom can jump onto this nearest neighbor vacancy. So, you can see this will lead to formation of an anti site of A. So, once this jump occurs, the vacancy has been moved to the A sublattice, and one A atom has been moved to a B sublattice. So, this forms an anti site of A on B. So, you can imagine this diffusion mechanism, that is the nearest neighbor jump, would be operative if the formation of an anti site is a low energy event. For example, in nickel aluminide, especially on the nickel rich side, the nickel anti site equilibrium concentration is considerable, and so the nickel can diffuse by nearest neighbor jumps. Not for aluminum, because aluminum anti site is a high energy structure. So, how does aluminum diffuse? It can diffuse by jump to a next nearest neighbor site. So, the second mechanism is next nearest neighbor jump, or in short denoted as triple NJ. So, in a B2 structure, if there is a vacancy on B sublattice denoted by the square here, and another B atom can jump onto that vacancy, and B atom is located only onto the next nearest neighbor site of this vacancy. So, this is the next nearest neighbor jump, and you can see exchanging with the vacancy on the next nearest neighbor site is not causing any disorder, that is, no wrong bonds are formed. Okay. However, this requires large activation energy, right. As you can see, each corner atom is touching the central atom. So, you can imagine, for example, this atom is bonded with this A atom here, A atom the body center of the cube on side of it, and there would be other two atoms on this side out of the plane, and as this B atom is moving, it has to push apart these A atoms, and so the activation barrier for the next nearest neighbor jump triple Nj is very high. So, the triple Nj will be active if the ordering energy is very high, because the ordering energy is very high, a nearest neighbor jump will not be possible, because a nearest neighbor jump will produce wrong bonds or disorder, which will lead to a very high energy configuration. A nearest neighbor jump will be possible if the ordering energy is low, or if one of the atom is very small. If the atom is very small, then it can form an anti-site, and so it can diffuse by nearest neighbor jump or double Nj, whereas the larger atom will diffuse by triple Nj or next nearest neighbor jump. So, in ordered structure, especially in B2 compounds, as we have seen, the nearest neighbor jump lead to a disorder or formation of wrong bonds. However, if we consider sequence of jumps of a vacancy, and at the end of which sequence, if the order is restored, that can be taken as a unit step of diffusion. Since the order is restored at the end of this sequence of correlated jumps of the vacancy, the total energy or the total activation barrier for this type of mechanism can still be less than the next nearest neighbor jump barrier, and so this mechanism can be operative in ordered structure. One such mechanism which was proposed is called a 6 jump vacancy cycle, or after those who proposed this is also called as Huntington-Alcock-McCombie mechanism. As the name suggests, it consists of sequence of 6 jumps of a vacancy. So, let me illustrate the SJVC mechanism in a B2 crystal structure. So, I have shown 2 B2 unit cubes here, one on top of the other. You can see 2 A atoms at the body centers of the cubes. Let us denote this one by A and this is as A prime, and there is a vacancy on the B sublattice VA. So, in the sequence of 6 jumps of the vacancy, the first jump of the vacancy, remember in the sequence of the 6 jumps of the vacancy, all jumps are n and j or nearest neighbor jumps. So, the first jump of the vacancy can be on this site A. So, this is jump 1. After that A will occupy a B sublattice site. So, there is an anti-site of A on B which is produced, and the vacancy has moved to A sublattice. Let us call this atom as B, because this will take part in this SJVC cycle. And A prime is still where it was. The next jump of the vacancy will be obviously onto a B sublattice. So, let us say it exchanges with this atom B. As the B now jumps onto A sublattice, so there is one more anti-site form which is B on A. So, we have B on A and there is A on B which was formed after the previous jump. So, this was the second jump, then A prime is where it was, and the vacancy has moved to a B sublattice. So, the third jump of the vacancy will be with an A atom. So, let us say it exchanges with A prime here during the third jump. So, now A prime has also moved to B sublattice. So, we have now 3 anti-sites, A on B, A prime on B, this is A prime and this is A, and then one B on A. This is B, and the vacancy is now at the position of A prime. So, 3 anti-sites are now formed. The fourth jump of the vacancy would be most probably with an anti-site A. This is the fourth jump. So, after the fourth jump, A has restored its sublattice. Of course, it has switched its position on the A sublattice, and the vacancy has moved to B sublattice. There are still 2 anti-sites left, B on A and A prime on B. During its fifth jump, the vacancy will now exchange with the anti-site of B on A. So, the vacancy is now moved to an A sublattice, and B has restored its sublattice, and of course, B has switched its position. But there is still one anti-site left, that is A prime on B. So, the last jump of the vacancy will be with this anti-site A prime on B. So, A prime has also restored its sublattice now, but you can see after 6 jumps A and A prime has swapped their positions. The vacancy has also swapped its position with B along the 110 position. after the sequence of 6 jumps of this vacancy, 2 A atoms which were next nearest neighbors of each other have swapped their position, and vacancy on B sublattice has swapped its position with a B atom along 110 direction. And at the end of 6th jump, the order is restored, no wrong bonds are left, and so this is one unit step of diffusion, and this is called SJVC, 6 jump vacancy cycle. At the end of this particular SJVC, the vacancy has moved along 110, and so this is denoted as 110 SJVC. We can also have a sequence of jumps of this vacancy such that the vacancy will move along 100 at the end of 6 jumps, and that will be 100 SJVC. Now, again within that 100 SJVC there are 2 variants, either all jumps may be in the same plane, which is denoted as straight 100 SJVC, or some jumps may be out of plane, which is denoted as bent 100 SJVC. That you can do as exercise to create a sequence of 6 jumps of straight 100 SJVC and bent 100 SJVC. This mechanism is quite active in B2 type of crystal structures, and particularly in NIL. Many researchers have shown the energy barrier for SJVC may be much less than the energy barrier for example, KANPUR-NPTEL, next nearest neighbor jumps. One more mechanism that we are going to look at is Tai vacancy mechanism. Tai vacancy is a pair of vacancies on 2 nearest neighbor sites. So, obviously, one vacancy is on A sublattice, the other is on B sublattice in a B2 structure. This is a schematic of B2 crystal which shows a Tai vacancy. So, you can see there is one vacancy on A sublattice, and there is another vacancy which is the nearest neighbor of this vacancy, and it is on B sublattice. In a Tai vacancy mechanism, the Tai vacancy moves as a pair, which means during the diffusion the Tai vacancy never dissociates. For this to occur, during the diffusion Tai vacancy never dissociates, and all jumps are KANPUR-NPTEL, next nearest neighbor jumps. Now, if all jumps have to take place by next nearest neighbor jump and the Tai vacancy should never dissociate, any individual vacancy will be able to jump on 3 next nearest neighbor sites. We know in B2 there are 6 next nearest neighbor site to any atom, but we have to select the sites which are next nearest neighbor to the vacancy. At the same time, those sites have to be nearest neighbor of the second vacancy. So, there are 3 such sites. So, if we consider this particular vacancy on B, you can see the 3 sites are, let us denote it as B1, B2, B3. So, the first one is this B1, which is also a nearest neighbor of the vacancy on A. The second one is B2, which is next nearest neighbor for vacancy on B, but nearest neighbor for vacancy on A, and the B3. This is also nearest neighbor of vacancy on A. Similarly, there are 3 sites on which the vacancy on A can jump by n and j individually, and those 3 sites which are also nearest neighbor of the vacancy on B. The one is obviously the A atom, which is shown in the cube under the first one here. Second A atom would be in the cube on the right side, and the third A atom would be in the cube which is placed in front of this top cube here. So, this is A3. So, these are the 3 atoms onto which the vacancy on A can jump individually. So, this is Tai vacancy mechanism. The last mechanism that we are going to look at is triple defect mechanism. In the last class, we have seen triple defect is a defect complex which consists of 2 vacancies and 1 anti-site. So, in the triple defect mechanism, the diffusion is assisted by formation of a triple defect. So, this is a schematic B2 structure. I have shown 2 unit cubes, which shows a Tai vacancy, that is a pair of vacancies on nearest neighbor sites. So, one on A sublattice, this is V A, the other one on B sublattice, this is V B. Now, if A atom happens to be small, it can jump onto the nearest neighbor vacancy on B, and it will lead to formation of an anti-site. So, the vacancy will move to A sublattice, A will form an anti-site A on B, now we can see it has formed a triple defect, which involves 2 vacancies on A sublattice and 1 A anti-site. So, this is a triple defect V A, A on B and V A. That is why this is called a triple defect. On its next jump, the anti-site A can exchange with the other vacancy by nearest neighbor jump. So, A will restore its position in A sublattice, but it has changed its site obviously on the A sublattice. The vacancy has moved to B sublattice, and B atom being larger can diffuse by triple NJ or next nearest neighbor jumps. So, now this B atom can jump into this site, this is triple NJ of B. So, B has now moved here, this is A, this is B, vacancy on A and vacancy on B. So, if we compare with where we started, the die vacancy V A and V B has in effect moved to next nearest neighbor site. Also, one A atom and one B atom have moved to next nearest neighbor site. So, this is how the triple defect assists the diffusion process in P2 intermetallic. Okay. So, these are some of the important diffusion mechanisms that have been proposed in intermetallics, and I have illustrated it with respect to B2 sublattice. I will stop here for today. Thank you.